I would say that clinicians are quite suspectful about bioengineers, and that's a pity. And this is another fight involved here. There's another fight between pharmaceutical companies and bioengineers because they don't trust us. So basically, I want to focus on the models we're currently running and how we want to bring these tools in the market, or at least how to implement these tools and make them closer to clinicians, just to see if they finally trust us or believe in us. Let's take a look. So first I will talk about the motivation and objectives of our study. Then I will briefly summarize the bone remodeling model we're using and how we use it to simulate postmenopausal osteoporosis and age-related osteoporosis, which I will abbreviate as PMO and ARO, and how we simulate the treatments against osteoporosis. And then I will try to show you how we can simulate combinations of treatments and how we can gain perspective on these combined treatments compared with the clinical studies. And finally, if I have the time to do this, I will try to address other factors that can be involved in the process of bone remodeling and in the approach to treat osteoporosis. This can be the inclusion of calcium homeostasis in the model. So, motivation, osteoporosis, which is a generalized bone loss coming through age. Well, there are two types of osteoporosis. Secondary osteoporosis is a consequence of other pathologies, and I will focus on primary osteoporosis, which is a consequence of aging. There are two types of primary osteoporosis. Both are related to aging, but type 2 is only caused by senescence of cells. So that's what we call simply age-related osteoporosis. And type 1 is a consequence of age, but not due to age only, not due to aging, but to something that happens in women with aging, which is the menopause. And the estrogen deficiency, estrogen decline that produces certain changes in women's body, and that's what we call postmenopausal osteoporosis. What we know from clinical studies is that patients undergoing any of those types of osteoporosis finally lose bone, and they have an increased fracture risk that we want to tackle. We want to improve their quality of life, and we want to reduce the fracture risk doing something, and that's why we treat those patients. We can use drugs, but bringing drugs to market is not an easy task, believe me. It's a very long process. It begins with preclinical studies in cell models or in animal models. And then when we know that certain drug is efficient, then we try it with humans. Phase 1, you deal with safety. Is it safe? Phase 2, is it efficient? Phase 3, it is more efficient than already existing drugs. And when we have proved these 3 phases, and it is, and we can compare it with other treatments, and it is more efficient, then we bring it to market. And we continue evaluating the efficacy of the drug in phase 4. But it can take up to 4 years or 5 years or even more, depending on the needs of the market. For example, think of the pandemic, or depending on the complexity of the drug or the disease. And think of combined treatments. Can we try a combination of several treatments, several drugs that are in the market? That's something that pharmaceuticals don't use to do because of ethical issues. Think of, we cannot use humans as guinea pigs. So we can have an alternative. And alternatives are in silico trials because they can reduce length. We just need a computer. They are free. Just click your button on the computer, and that's it. And it's free of ethical issues because we can try whatever combination you may think of. So that's a very powerful tool, I think. So what we want to assess in this study is the fracture risk in postmenopausal osteoporosis and to design a patient-specific treatment. And to analyze other aspects not involved only in drugs, for example, the influence of exercise or diet or vitamin D intake or deficiency, or other conditions such as chronic kidney disease or hyperparathyroidism, which I will abbreviate as HPT. Hyperparathyroidism is quite a long word. How is the influence of the concurrence of all these factors in the evolution of the disease? And can we use some of them in favor of our study? To assess fracture risk, you probably know FRAX. It is a statistical tool developed by the University of Sheffield and WHO, the World Health Organization. And it's a statistical tool. It's just based on statistics of a certain population, of populations of different countries. So it's a country-specific tool. And, well, it has been used by clinicians for a long time because it's very easy for them to use it. It has some pros. For example, it improved previous predictions that were purely based on BMD or T-score because it considers other factors. And it's very robust and very simple to use for clinicians, which don't know much about biomechanics or single treatment. But it has many, many cons. For example, no dose response for several factors such alcohol or smoking. You just answer yes or no questions. But now, how much alcohol you drink daily or how many cigarettes you smoke? Or the impact of prior fracture is underestimated because it is very important. It is not the same to have undergone 2 fractures or 1 fracture with a deformity than only 1 fracture without deformity. Or the BMD at the lumbar spine is not considered at all, only at the hip. Or the material properties of the bone are not considered, or the trabecular quality, trabecular microstructure is not considered. Or any other conditions, such as renal condition, chronic kidney disease, or HPT, they are not considered. So I think that it is quite improvable. But think of one thing. It would be very advisable to have a tool that predicts not only the current fracture risk, but the future fracture risk if the patient would take any drug. So what we want to do is develop an alternative tool that includes the effect of drugs on fracture risk. So we can give this tool to the clinician, and he or she can use it as a calculator to estimate how much the fracture risk is reduced if you give your patient a certain drug during a certain time, or if you switch from one drug to another. And we can use it also to calculate an optimal treatment, which is the best treatment for this patient, right? So this is our final goal. This is our long-term goal, to develop such a tool. I will address now some basic summary of my bone remodeling model. You know that bone is continuously being renewed. There are some cells called osteoclasts, here in red, that resorb the old bone, old and probably damaged bone. And then the blue cells, the osteoblasts, form new bone. In this way, we are renovating, we are renewing bone structure, and we are replacing the old and damaged bone with a new intact bone. Furthermore, if the activity of osteoclasts predominates over osteoblasts activity, then you will have bone loss, and vice versa. If you have more osteoblasts than osteoclasts, then you will gain bone. This is what happens in osteoporosis, that the activity of osteoclasts predominates over the activity of osteoblasts. And here you can see that there are many biochemical factors involved in the process. For example, TGF-beta, which is a transforming growth factor that is released. It is stored in the bone matrix, and it is released from bone matrix by resorption. So osteoclasts are releasing that cytokine. And it causes several things. For example, it induces apoptosis of osteoclasts. So basically, osteoclasts are releasing their own poison. They're poison on themselves. This controls the population of osteoclasts. And in the other lineage, TGF-beta promotes the differentiation of stem cells into osteoblast precursors. Can I? Oh, sorry. Can I use it as a pointer? The top bottom? Yeah. This one? I think so. Yeah. Right, thank you. So, TGF-beta is promoting this differentiation of stem cells into osteoblast precursors and blocking or inhibiting this differentiation. So TGF-beta is making this pool of cells to grow and grow. So basically, we are accumulating OBP until the population of OBP is so large that they end up differentiating into active osteoblasts. This way, TGF-beta is controlling the sequence of bone remodeling. So first, resorption takes place, then this OBP population grows, and some days later, they differentiate into active osteoblasts. That's why resorption and formation occurs at different times. And TGF-beta is key to control this sequence. Sorry. Another pathway which is worth mentioning is the RANK ligand OPG signaling pathway. RANK is a protein which is expressed on the surface of osteoclast precursors, and when it binds to RANK ligand, which is expressed or secreted by osteoblast precursors and also by osteocytes, which are embedded in the bone matrix, then the binding of RANK and RANK ligand triggers differentiation of osteoclasts. So this final step of differentiation is derived from the binding of RANK and RANK ligand. So if you have RANK ligand, then you will end up having many osteoclasts. And OPG is another protein which is secreted by active osteoblasts, which interferes in this signaling pathway. So OPG can also bind to RANK ligand, to RANKL. And if OPG binds to RANKL, then RANKL does not bind to RANK. So OPG is preventing the differentiation of osteoclasts. That's why they call it osteoprotegerin. It's protecting bone in some way. And I need to talk about the role of PTH, which is a hormone secreted by the parathyroid glands, which are close to the thyroid, which enhances the production of RANK ligand and decreases the production of OPG. So basically what PTH is doing is promoting this differentiation. If you have higher PTH levels, then you will end up having more osteoclasts. And why? Because PTH is released, is excreted when the body senses that calcium levels in the blood are very low. And you need to increase that calcium level. And how do you do it? You take it from the bone matrix, where calcium is stored. So if the body senses that calcium levels are low, then PTH is secreted, and then you're promoting this differentiation by enhancing RANKL and diminishing OPG. And there are other signaling pathways. For example, the Wnt LRP5/6 signaling pathway. When these two proteins connect, they trigger the proliferation of OBP. So this is an anabolic signaling pathway, which can be interfered by sclerostin. Sclerostin is a protein that can bind to LRP5 as well. And again, if sclerostin binds to LRP5, then Wnt cannot bind to LRP5. And this proliferation doesn't take place. So sclerostin is blocking proliferation of pre-osteoblasts. So sclerostin is an anti-anabolic protein whose role is just controlling the population of OBP. And finally, the most important equation is we calculate the population of osteoclasts, and we calculate the final population of osteoblasts, and we can calculate with them the variation of porosity. This is the population of osteoblasts and the formation rate, and this is the population of osteoclasts and the resorption rate. The balance between the bone resorbed and formed gives us the variation of porosity, which is key to evaluate the evolution of the disease. Not only biomechanical factors, there are also mechanical factors involved, as Frost, and probably you all know the mechanostat theory and how it controls the evolution of bone, and how high mechanical stimulus enhances bone formation. This is due to the inhibition of sclerostin production. If you have a high mechanical load, then you're inhibiting the production of sclerostin, and then you're not blocking the proliferation of osteoblast precursors. Or if you have a very low mechanical stimulus, if you're resting in bed for months, then you will lose bone because you're promoting the production of RANKL. And then RANKL binds to RANK, and then it produces osteoclasts. So you tend to lose bone if your mechanical stimulus is low, and you tend to gain bone if your mechanical stimulus is high. But if your mechanical stimulus is too high, you can lead bone to suffer, to experience fracture. And this will end up activating resorption as well. Because you must think of another part of the mechanism, another cell involved in it, which are the osteocytes. Osteocytes are able to sense the mechanical environment and to sense the load, and they act as a response to that mechanical environment. So they receive nutrients, and if the nutrients flow through the lacunar canalicular network that interconnects the osteocytes, then they're okay, they're feeling good, they don't say nothing. They don't say anything. we're okay. Go on. But if there is some microcrack disrupting the lacunar canalicular network, these osteocytes don't receive nutrients. And they say, oh, something's going wrong. I need you to act. Please, make something. Do something, because I'm starving. I'm not receiving the nutrients. So they used to undergo apoptosis. They suffered cell death. And they send signals to macrophages. They are come and eat me signals that attract macrophages to that state, to that point, and tell them to resorb bone. So microcracks and microstructural damage can finally lead to bone resorption as well. So be careful, not too much exercise. We consider damage from a mechanical engineering perspective. We use basically continuum damage mechanics, where the damage variable is a measurement of the density of microcracks, but also the loss of stiffness. So damage, as you can see, it controls the relationship between an intact Young's modulus and the current Young's modulus. For example, if D equals 0, it means you have an intact bone and your Young's modulus is equal to the intact Young's modulus. But if you have damage equal to 1, it means that you have broken that bone site and you have no stiffness at that particular point. So we want to evaluate the evolution of damage through time with the loads. And we can do it using studies of fatigue ex vivo, studies of fatigue in cortical bone. With this, we can evaluate the accumulation of damage as a function of the strain and the number of cycles. But also we consider the resorption, the repairing of damage, because as said in the first 2 slides, bone renewal aims at repairing damage, because osteoclasts resorb old and damaged bone and replace it with new intact bone. So bone resorption is removing damage. How much? The more damage there is, the more damage will be repaired. And the more bone is being resorbed, the more damage will be removed. And finally, we can make a balance between the accumulated damage and the repair damage. And we end up having an evolution of damage over time, which is key to evaluate the fracture risk. So actually, we can calculate how is the evolution of damage over time for a given overload. If we include in our evolution of damage a certain overload, we can calculate how many cycles we need to reach failure. That's why we define the number of days until failure, which is the number of days to reach D equal to 1, if we apply n cycles daily for a given overload and in a certain condition. And with this number of days until failure, we define the fracture risk index, or FRI, which is 100 divided by the number of days until failure. If you think of it, if the number of days until failure is just 1, that is, if your bone breaks this very day, then the fracture risk index is 100. It's not a percentage, but you can think of it as a percentage, right? And if your number of days until failure tends to infinity because the overload is too low, or if your bone is in good condition, then your fracture risk index tends to 0. You're okay. Go on, go ahead. Walk every day 12 kilometers. If not, be careful. So how do we simulate these 2 diseases and the treatments? We have recently published this study where we could introduce, we could model the influence of aging in our model and the influence of menopause. We distinguish it to fit the results, the clinical results of bone density in men and women. So we tried different scenarios, and we end up having this very good model, this blue curve, which is considering the effect of TGF-beta, which decreases with age, and sclerostin production, which increases with age. So if you have more sclerostin, then you will end up blocking your bone formation. That's why we lose bone from 20, 25 years age onwards. But in women you have two effects, because at the onset of menopause around 50, estrogen decline plays a key role, and the abrupt fall of bone density is very acute at this point. So if we adjusted the effect of aging, we had to sum it to the effect of estrogen deficiency, estrogen decline in women. With this, we could add two variables to our model. Not only age, which was not considered before this paper, the influence of age and the influence of age at menopause, which are important. And then treatment. We have different options. For example, I just chose 3 drugs that are in the market. Denosumab, that suppress differentiation of osteoclasts. There was an imbalance between osteoclast activity and osteoblast activity. We have 2 ways to tackle it. We want to suppress osteoclast to get, again, the balance, or we can promote osteoblasts. That's what we do with the romosozumab. Or we can have the same population of osteoclasts, but impaired. That's what bisphosphonates do. They just make osteoclasts like dump, not able to resorb, or they just promote their apoptosis. And denosumab just suppresses differentiation of osteoclasts, so you have less osteoclasts. In the case of bisphosphonates, you have the same osteoclasts, but less active. And for example, in the case of denosumab, which is the only one that I'm going to analyze here, denosumab plays the same role as OPG. It can interfere also in the binding between RUNC and RUNC ligand. So DMAP, denosumab, can bind to RUNC ligand, and if RUNC ligand does not bind to RUNC, then no osteoclast differentiation takes place. But we need a PK/PD model, a pharmacokinetics-pharmacodynamics model of that drug. PK model, pharmacokinetics, tells us what does the body do to the drug, how it is absorbed or how it is eliminated, which is the concentration of the drug over time. And pharmacodynamics tells us what does the drug do to the body? What is the effect as a function of the concentration? And the junction of both tells us which is the effect as a concentration as a function of concentration, and concentration as a function of time, then which is the effect as a function of time. And we model how the drug passes through the injection site to the central compartment, that is blood serum, and how it is eliminated through urine, or how it is passed into the bone compartment, and how it affects here the bone remodeling process. And we could check this, for example. These are the typical PK profiles curves, different doses, and the evolution of plasma concentration of the drug over time for different doses. And here's the effect of the drug on different patients. Here you can see the decline in density, in bone density after menopause. Here's the onset of menopause. The estrogen decline begins here, and after 3 years, you begin the treatment for 3 patients of different weight. The red one is a light patient, 50 kilos, but the green one is a quite heavy patient, 80 kilos, and the response is not the same. And in spite of that, WHO, FDA, or EMA, the agencies that control or that suggest clinicians what they have to do, tell them use 60Q6, that is 60 milligrams every 6 months, and that's all, regardless of the body weight. And we proved that the response is not the same. Now we must convince the clinicians that they should adjust the dose to patients, don't you think? But we also want to include, as I said, the effect of aging and the age of menopause, because the effect is not the same. For example, here we compare the evolution of density in women with menopause at different age, and how that effect is temporary. After a certain amount of years, after a number of years, the evolution comes together into the same curve. But for example, here the response to denosumab, here you can see the bone density decline and the treatment, and how you gain bone with the treatment. The efficacy of this blue curve, which is late menopause, is not very significant. So you had better not start your treatment at 60 if menopause occurred at 54. At least 10 years. You should wait for 10 years after the onset of menopause to begin the treatment. So not only age is important, but also the age at menopause could play a role. So that's why we include all those things in our tool. We want to include the age at menopause, which is not considered in the FRAX tool, and the weight, which is considered. But we also want to include here the information of the drug treatment. And we would like to provide the clinicians with this tool to try, just to use it as a calculator. If I try DMAP or ROMO in the vertebra or in the femur with a certain dose and a certain frequency between injections, what would be the final fracture risk after 4 years or after 10 years? And then combination of treatments. It is important to deal with this because they have side effects, serious side effects that make them not to be extendable for long. Particularly denosumab and bisphosphonates are taken for 5 years, not longer. And ROMO, only 1 year of treatment, not longer than that. You cannot take ROMO for more than 1 year. And then, if the fracture risk persists, what do we do? What do clinicians do when the fracture risk persists after taking one treatment? They can switch. They can take another treatment. And the most common thing is change from anti-resorptive treatments to anabolic treatments like ROMO. This is the most common way. Starting with, because the first drug is an anti-resorptive because it's cheaper, much cheaper than anabolic, despite anabolics are far more efficient than anti-catabolic. So usually patients had taken anti-resorptives, and then if it does not work, then they go to anabolic treatments. Why not start with an anabolic one? Because low adherence. For example, teriparatide is 1 daily injection and very costly. And they have quite serious, or they can have quite serious side effects. But why this combination? Why starting with an antiresorptive and then moving into an anabolic? This is not published. It's just an ongoing research, but we have, this is something that's known, that the effectiveness of Romo plus DMAP, that is first an anabolic and then an antiresorptive, is higher than the other way around. So we had better start with an anabolic and then go to an anticatabolic. But this is not the normal practice, clinical practice. It is just the other way around. And the effectiveness is much worse. Why? Well, think of what the anabolic and anticatabolic treatments do. Anabolic enhance bone formation, and anticatabolic just freeze bone turnover. So what you have here is what you will get. You can mineralize your old bone, and that's why you gain bone. You gain bone mass, because you're mineralizing your existing bone. But you're not gaining bone volume. You're just mineralizing what you have. And that's not a very good option. Because mineralizing involves fragilization of bone matrix. So you will end up having more cracks, more micro cracks, and your fracture risk will increase. So not a good option in the long term. So why not starting with an anabolic where you gain bone volume, and then when you have more bone volume, then you mineralize it. That's what you get with the other combination. First an anabolic and then an anticatabolic. But think of another thing. When we administer an anticatabolic drug, we're just freezing bone turnover. We're just diminishing all the populations, particularly the population of OBP. Here you can see the evolution of OBP and how it decreases with the DMAP treatment. This is the DMAP plus D plus R, and this is the R plus D. So we are diminishing the population of OBP. And the effect of anabolic drugs is promoting proliferation of OBP. So if you start with a lower population of OBP, then this proliferation is less effective. But as I said, if you first administer Romo, then you're having more bone volume, and then you will mineralize this new tissue. So R plus D is more efficient, as clinical studies confirmed, and we have now given an explanation for that. So we want to include an optimization tool to our model. That's why we want to use it not just as a calculator, but also as an optimizer. The objective would be to maximize the bone volume or to minimize porosity, subject to different conditions. For example, to a limited mineral content, because an excess of mineral content would fragilize bone matrix, or we want to limit damage in order to reduce fracture risk as well. But the model is quite computationally is quite expensive. It's very costly, so we needed to train an artificial neural network to learn the behavior of the model. So in this neural network, the input were age at menopause, T-score, that is density, and dose and frequency of any treatment, and then the outputs were the porosity, the mineral content, and damage. And just we wanted to formulate an optimization algorithm where we wanted to minimize porosity or maximize the bone volume fraction. As I said, subject to limited mineral content to reduce fragility, or to limit damage to reduce fracture risk, and with these bounds for the dose, for the frequency, and we wanted to minimize the average porosity or maximize the average bone volume fraction at different time windows. And just a brief summary of the results. We compared 6 cases with the nominal. For this patient, 61 years old, 50 years at menopause, and this body weight and T-score, this is the optimal dose. But in a younger patient who had the same T-score for an earlier age, so in this case, the disease is more severe, so she will need a higher dose. Or if she had menopause, if she had an early menopause and she still has the same T-score, it means that the severity of her disease is not that high. So she will need a less dose. For example, a heavier patient will need a higher dose. Or in the case of a more severe disease, because she has a graded T-score, it's a minus score, but this is a more severe disease, she will need a higher dose. Or for example, in this case, which is not an osteoporotic patient, but an osteopenic, not going into osteoporosis, but right now osteopenic, and it doesn't need, basically it doesn't need the drug. This is the minimum drug, the minimum allowed drug. And well, I think I don't have the time to go into this, just to summarize it a little bit. We want to include other effects, not only bone remodeling, but also the effects of calcium homeostasis and basically the effect of PTH, which controls the level of calcium. You know that calcium is very important for muscular contraction. So if the body senses that the calcium level is very low, then it activates mechanisms to increase that blood serum calcium level. At 3 levels, the body increased absorption at the intestine. They decrease excretion to urine and promotes recirculation of the existing calcium. And then if calcium is too low, then it promotes bone resorption to retrieve calcium from bone matrix where it is stored. This is the model developed by Peterson and Riggs, and what we want to do now is to replace the bone compartment with our model, and with this study different things that, I will give you the slides. I think that it's a good time to stop. And if you will have the slides, I will be very happy to share all of them with you. And at the end of the presentation, it's my email. So if you want to contact me, feel free. And well, that's it.
Thank you so much, Professor, for your really nice presentation. Does anybody have any question?
Thank you. So very impressive. I really liked it. So I was wondering when you studied the effect of a drug, right? Like if there is a new drug coming from a different company, when building these models and when doing this, how do you engage with the pharma company? Do you need to work alongside with them to have information about the drug? Can you actually develop your models kind of independently from that, or just curiosity?
Yeah. Well, actually, I tried to contact them, Amgen, which was the developer of DMAP, and I had no feedback. So basically, they slammed the door, and that's it. It's very hard to, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, it's like a fight, like we were fighting the pharmaceutical companies, because, to be fair, we are comparing the effect of different drugs developed by different companies. So they don't want to collaborate with us because we could end up stating that theirs is not the best drug, but other company is drug. So And in case of the combined treatments, we could end up stating that the best combination is teriparatide and DMAP, and they're from different companies. And oof,
And in an ideal world where they open the doors, do you think that they could provide, information, data, etc., that would be of benefit for your model that right now is kind of difficult to?
Well, they will not provide us with the data, but we can take it. We can take it because it's public. If we contact the clinicians and hospitals, we know the historic of the files of every patient, and we can learn the results for every patient and the doses they took, and they cannot prevent us from doing that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Javier, for the nice presentation. So just two curiosity. First curiosity is, so you just presented about the combining of treatment. So, but let's say some of the clinicians, sometimes they refer to holidays, drugs holiday, between, so as you said, let's say it's really dangerous to prolong too much the treatment. So they say, okay, well, let's make a break of. So does deep break actually make an effect, or?
It does not. Actually, It is detrimental. It is quite detrimental. We tried to model the discontinuation of DMAP, and actually our model could not simulate exactly what happened in the discontinuation study because we did not include osteomorphs, which is a very recently discovered type of cell, which we did not include in our model. But we know from clinical studies that the discontinuation of DMAP is very detrimental. So drug holidays in the case of DMAP are not advised. Okay. And in the case of bromo, for example, we tried in the combination bromo plus DMAP, we tried different lapses between the end of one treatment and the beginning of the next. Mm-hmm. And there was no gain in waiting more than 6 months. So the longer you waited, the worse results you would get.
Interesting. Okay, and the other curiosity that I was thinking, so, well, some of the treatment actually make an effect to the entire bone. Some of them are more focused on, for instance, cortical or trabecular. How can you take this in with your model, or you are going to consider that also?
Yep. This model I presented today is just a local model. So we could say that it's applied on an average bone, but actually we're modeling just one bone site of a given porosity. So we can use it for trabecular bone at a given bone site or cortical bone separately. But we are currently working on the inclusion of this model into a finite element model of a whole femur. And there we could investigate the interaction between cortical and trabecular bone. Because mechanical feedback is very important. I didn't talk much about mechanical feedback, but if you are losing more bone in the cortical and the cortex, then these loads would need to be transferred to the trabecular, and the mechanical environment would change for the trabecular area. So this is a key point, actually. But right now, the model is just a local model.
Okay, thank you. No more curiosity.
Thank you for your great presentation. Maybe my question is not limited to your today's presentation. It may relate to your knowledge in your previous research too. But we are working on fracture and the probability of fracture in femur and other bones. My question is that I guess you mentioned about the effect of age, effect of weight, bone mineral density, and some other points. Something which is very important and effective in my mind is the, as you mentioned, the mineral or other material properties, let's say, constitutive materials in the micro and even nano level of bone tissues. I just wanted to check which parameters did you measure, did you check, and if other parameters like, as I said, in tissue properties, affect more on the, let's say, overall fracture or overall response of the bones in the osteoporosis or other similar diseases, in your knowledge. Thank you.
Good, but complex question. It's a good question, but very complex, because we still don't know much about which are the most influential mechanism on bone fracture. We guess that in trabecular bone, for example, is the quality of trabecular microstructure can play a key role. And in the case of cortical bone, I would say that mineral content is the only, because, well, the variation of porosity in cortical bone is not that significant. So what we do know is that an excess of mineral content fragilizes bone. And in the case of antidisruptive drugs, this is a very important problem, because you're basically increasing your mineral content, and it reduces the viscoelastic properties of bone, which are useful to bear the loads in a more efficient way, certain dynamic loads. And in the case of cortical bone, this is key. In the case of trabecular bone, I would say the quality of microstructure is the key point. And the reduction of porosity, the increase of porosity or the reduction of bone volume, which is more significant in trabecular bone than in cortical bone.
Thank you for your answer. Exactly, I mean, for example, in a similar bone mineral density, in two cases, we usually see the response would be exactly different, varies highly. And as you mentioned, the mineral properties and mineral parameters affect highly. And I guess I should get your instruction via our email, and thank you for your good presentation. Thank you.
Sorry, in one of your slides, you showed the effect of patients' weight who had different reaction when they received the same dose of the drug. Would you please let us know that is it a part of your paper which recently published in Mechanobiology? Because I'm interested to read in details about that, or any other paper.
Yeah, I can give you the details, the exact DOI of the paper,
okay.
because it was in a, I would say 2022 maybe.
Okay,
paper.
so it is different. Okay.
Yeah, it is already published.
Okay.
It was already published.
And another question about the cohort that you used in your recent paper, 2024, because I saw that it was a longitudinal cohort, yes? Because you investigated the effect during time in each patient.
You mean the evolution of density over time,
yeah.
with age?
Yeah.
Well, I'm using the results of obtained by Rick and colleagues, and I don't know exactly the size of their cohort, but it was quite large, I would say.
Okay.
And yeah, what I want to say is that in that paper we have recently published, we only analyzed the average behavior. So we have a point cloud, and these authors drew the average evolution of density, and we just tried to adjust to this average evolution of density. And now we are implementing a probabilistic model into our model to try to capture the scattering of the results, the dispersion of the results.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you. We want to close this session.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.